This week on the 77% Street Debate.
I want to be involved in a Sierra Leone where the local trader and the minister can send their kids to the same school because they can afford it.
All we needed is the platform for us to really succeed in these ventures and then be the next Elon Musk of Africa.
How can we be talking about robotics and big data when people don't even have access to power? Hello and welcome to the 77%. We're here at the Prince of Wales School in Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone. And in this country, 8 out of every 10 people is under the age of 35. I had to look that number up again because it's unbelievable. 80% of the population are within the 77%. But the question we want to ask today is the government doing enough to not just empower this youth, but also make them competitive globally? Who better to answer that question for me than some Sierra Leoneans? And I want to begin with Haja, because you've had the opportunity to not just study abroad, but also have an enterprise here. So perhaps you can give me, based on your experience, do you think that the youth in this country have been enabled or empowered enough to basically be part of the global community?
They're only, as of a few months ago, there were only 3 disciplines in Sierra Leone when you go to high school. So there's the arts, the commercial, and the science. And based on my grades, when I sat the Becker examination, which is the examination you take before you go to high school, I had a good grade, so I ended up in the science because every smart person is supposed to be a doctor. And most of the things we were taught in school were not really practical. It was all theory. I learned about animals and their systems. I never got to see it, and everything I learned was basically just theoretical. And I really struggled with this when I got a scholarship to study in Norway in 2015. I took classes like chemistry and biology, and in all the experiments, which were very practical, I was really struggling, and my grades were not reflecting on the education system that I received in Sierra Leone. I was really smart here, and I went there. I realized I was just not exposed to this form of learning.
Let's ask the innovator who's actually standing right next to you, Mohammed. So you're one of the people who's not just creating employment, but also creating solutions for the youth here in Sierra Leone. So tell us briefly what you do and if what Haja is saying is reflective of your experience.
Yeah, so for me here in Sierra Leone, first of all, one thing that is clear, we young people are willing to solve problems and take our initiatives to the next stage. But one thing that is also missing is the fact that we don't have the ecosystem where we thrive and then succeed. For my own initiatives, I've been able to empower over 200 young people in my different initiatives, waste to energy initiatives, and power over 20 communities using waste to energy. Sometimes we are stuck in areas where we have our ideas, and then we see that these ideas have potential to really grow away from even the communities that we've started it, but it's stuck because there are no support to really scale up to the next stage and even secure funding.
Okay, before we get to the challenges, let me go to, here's Daniel, because we're talking about some of the impediments that come about, particularly after graduating, say, university. And I know finances was one of the key ones for you. Is it normal, or is it a normal occurrence for young people here to stop their tertiary education because there's simply no bursaries, no school fees?
I got my requirement in 2016. But there is no support financially for me to further my education. So I decided to move with Seratel, which is Sierra Leone Telecommunication, as a sales agent for me just to support my education. And I was working there for the past 6 years. There is no support. I thrived. There is no way.
Okay, what kind of support are we talking about here? Because we've heard that there are no structures on one hand. We've heard that there are simply no systems for people to fall back on. What are some of the other challenges that exist?
The challenge is, like I was saying, financial support. And there is no empowerment. Like Mohammed, he's an innovator, right? I was moving with, I said, oh, this is very good. I said, I need to work with Mohammed to push this initiative. And it's very good. It will empower me, and I was open to do engineering and ICT. But there's no support. I said, instead of me sitting, I have to support my mother and other stuff. I said, let me move with Mohammed to support certain things in my life.
Okay. All right. So let me speak to Dr. Yakama here for a second, because she is the Director of Research, if I'm not mistaken, for delivery in the Ministry of Finance. So It sounds to me like, the government has a great initiative in place, which is free primary education, or rather free education for all. But then after that, what next? That's what we're hearing. They're left to their own devices. Do you think that's true from where you're standing?
The thing is, yes, for years we've been focused on traditional education. That's the reality. But now we're transitioning and seeing the awareness and how people approach technical and vocational training and the need for entrepreneurship, and how it doesn't need to be just one sector or you having one calling to serve. You can serve in multiple ways. You can be a doctor and still be an entrepreneur. You can be an entrepreneur and an advocate. So having that platform or creating those systems in which
So
we
have
can
you
empower.
created them, or are these just thoughts and ideas
No,
that you
they
still
are
have?
being created. It's just that we need to scale up and find ways to accelerate the creation of those spaces. Yes, government has free quality education program for primary, junior secondary and senior secondary school. But then it's how we form linkages with other sectors and other players that also driving change in these spaces. We have those NGOs working towards empowering girls, those working towards even driving entrepreneurship, and it is how we can accelerate efforts to bring all of this together and approach this problem in a systematic way, so not working in silos. Then we can be able to leapfrog.
All right, let me ask Haja, because you talked about free and also quality education. You spoke earlier about the differences in how education is passed down. Do you think that the quality of education, what is being taught the back here, is enough?
I always say one thing. I am personally not the free kind of person, and that's my personal opinion, because
So you don't think education should be free?
I feel it should be accessible and affordable for everyone, because when it's free right now, only the poor people can send their kids to like government school. I want it to be I want to be involved in a Sierra Leone where the local trader and the minister can send their kids to the same school because they can afford it. So you have to put the systems in place for the people taking these children to school. I was part of the free education system when I was in secondary school. My school fees was 60,000 leones. I got it every year, was reimbursed to me for 45,000 leones. But my textbooks were up to $1 million, and that my parents found hard to afford. And I feel like with education, it's not just tuition, there's so much more involved. And these were the things I didn't have access to, especially as somebody who was in secondary school. And I was privileged enough because I had access to all these textbooks and stuff, which made me really smart student. But then there were other kids who couldn't afford it. Like Mohammed said, Daniel said, he couldn't get to college. And honestly, it's sad because he was smart and he is still smart, but how many of Daniels are out there? Yeah. How many of Daniels don't have this privilege to be on TV? I know Daniels. I have lived with Daniels. I have gone to school with Daniels. I come from a community of Daniels.
Okay. Now, earlier we also talked about access. And let's also focus on the Daniels, the girls, yeah? And the women in this community. Do you think there's equal opportunities for them within the context of Sierra Leone?
If I'm dreaming and using my feminist imagination and being optimistic, I would say we can compete, we have access, but the reality is we can't. We don't have access. I've been in a situation where at the age of 16, I got pregnant and I'm in high school. And the next thought in my head was, if I'm not going to go through school with this pregnancy, I'm going to kill myself. That's because for years, pregnant girls were not given the permission to go to school. And it became worse during the Ebola outbreak when over 14,000 girls became pregnant and all of them were kicked out of school. So for me, access is very important. And access is not just from the front face, say we have free quality education. Access is making sure that the system works for girls. And I would say progress has been done because the people of this nation led the most radical campaign I've seen in my life. And that's the campaign for pregnant girls to be in school. We've seen all of the progress. We've seen that women, girls, young people, we saw that girls who were kicked out of school during the Ebola outbreak, they stood up for their rights to education.
So we've had a situation or a scenario described by Josephine there, which sounds almost utopian and was actually successful. But Eric, working with people on the ground as a journalist and with a youth program, I'm sure that the stories you hear are wildly different from what we're hearing from Josephine. Can you tell me what young people express to you as their biggest challenges in this country?
When we talk about the issues of education, the issues of employment, it is quite perceived in a different way as it is being perceived in the lenses of the powers that may. So when you go to the place, now they tell you about employment, but you see a lot of young people out there who are not employed. In a situation, sometimes you see people would not have access to certain opportunities, even if they have the qualifications, unless they have to affiliate themselves to the powers that be. I was listening to the points of Daniel, who couldn't continue in school. That is the same situation when you talk to maybe people that are into the Okada commercial riding, which is a motorbike.
Yeah.
Some of them, you find out that they are there because they don't feel like being there, but because they don't have the opportunities or platforms to move forward.
Let me come back to you, Doctor, because we're hearing that there is a disconnect. I mean, surely the policies that you're creating behind closed doors sound wonderful, but the implementation, zero. Where does it get lost?
So if you look back at how Sierra Leone has developed over the years, you know that our growth has been in start, stop, start, and stop. But then what has kept us going is how we as a people are resilient, and we continue to adapt and evolve in how we implement, design, and roll out policies. As Josephine said, the development of the radical inclusion policy was quite inclusive, and we did have the validation today of the implementation plan and the monitoring and evaluation plan. So it shows that as a country, we're not stuck in doing things in the same old ways. We are moving towards doing things in better and more efficient ways. So that's why we have a whole of government approach to human capital development, not just looking at education, health, and agriculture, but all the factors that interlink this sector. So if we say we're talking about enhancing, getting farmers to get more seeds and fertilizers, it's also linking those farmers to markets, linking them to the school feeding program, linking the school feeding program to the nutrition program. So it's having a whole systems approach to development. But the thing is, when you implement new policies, impact takes a while to show. So that's why we look at intermediate outcomes for now, like number of farmers benefiting, number of children in school. We know that the investments need to continue. They need to be consistent. They need to be owned by everybody. We're now looking towards how we cannot be left behind in the fourth industrial revolution.
Because you've talked about the fourth industrial revolution, I must come to this because it surprised me dramatically that electricity penetration in this country is just above 20%. How can we be talking about robotics and big data when people don't even have access to power?
So that's the thing. And if we try to perceive it in the lens of this comes before the other, that's where we miss it. There are things that we can do together, and we can do that in more efficient ways.
Let's ask the person who's already doing it. Mohammed, we're hearing here that it's possible to both be waiting for power supply and still innovate. Is this true, or is the doctor dreaming?
Yeah, but one thing that is clear, we already have seen models that works in different countries. Yeah, people have developed solutions that can actually be replicated, that can be scaled up. We have, as you said earlier, literally just above 20% access to energy. We have windmills that we locally fabricated. All we need is we want to scale up the solutions and then replicate some more communities. We develop hydro generator just from scraps. All these solutions can solve our energy crisis, but the ecosystem does not provide us the opportunity to overcome, to scale up and then compete for the rest of the world. I know government might say they are restricted with funding and a lot of other areas, and they want to prioritize sectors, but also energy is needed.
And speaking of, I know that you're already solving those problems. I want to ask Stella to give me this, one of your innovations. Can you explain what this is? Because you're trying to solve the problem of energy in this country.
Yeah, so away from energy.
By the way, Haja is very excited. She's clapping for you on the side.
So I decided to use waste materials to build the first TV antenna just from scraps.
Oh.
And it's from scraps, and then I've been able to use this to install in over 2,000 communities, 2,000 households. All of this can be scaled up, and it can be replicated across different domains. And we are solving our own problem with our own solutions made in Sierra Leone. So all we needed is the platform for us to really succeed in these ventures and then be the next Elon Musk of Africa, be the next Bill Gates from Africa, which we already have seen these potentials.
All right. I want to hear from Eric because we've heard that the rural communities and the youth in the rural areas are experiencing vastly different challenges from the ones being faced here in the city. Can you tell me what some of those are?
Okay, so we say Freetown is not Sierra Leone. This is quite common. Taking from what he was saying earlier, everything is actually centralized in Freetown. So when you have access to certain opportunities for young people, maybe you look at internet penetration. Even those here in the city do not have access to very much better internet access. Now, when you go to the rural area, maybe the kind of university or whatever we have, everybody wants to come to Freetown, coming to Frabe College, going to the College of Medicine. Of course, we have Jala and other ones that are now doing, to that point. But we need more things that are to be probably decentralized. We don't need everything to be around Freetown. Also, another key thing that you need to take into consideration when we talk about many things like female or gender empowerment issues, you find out that many of the people you see that are championing these causes, probably they are within the city. So how much more can we try to reach out people in other areas?
All right. Speaking of women, I have to come back to Josephine because you've been accused of making all the noise only here in the center. First of all, do you agree with that assessment? And if it's true, what can be done to penetrate the knowledge, the information, the wealth?
First of all, I want to correct that point because the work I do is across the country. So the quote positive noise very is really fully across the country. The work I do at Purposeful is making sure that about 17,000 out of school girls who are living in rural communities who somehow are pregnant, who have been left out because of a system that perpetually discriminates their access to education, that we run safe spaces for them. This is a place, as I tell you, when I work in rural communities, I see that the only thing that some of these girls have are the safe spaces. Growing up a girl in this country is a challenge, is a struggle.
All right, let me ask Haja if people are being responsive, because as a woman who's in a position of leadership, I imagine you going to stand in front of a council of men to tell them about something. Do you think they would listen to you? We're being told that we need to do things differently. You could want that. You might be doing it, but is the country ready?
I'm going to talk a lot about this patriarchy because I work with menstruation. I work with reusable sanitary pads. I remember the first time I pitched to a bunch of men in New Jersey. This is in the West. They said to me, "Oh, you sound like Elon Musk. Maybe this will come true." This was not because they believed in me, but because they were telling me I was being delusional. But however, a year later, when I developed my product and again pitched in front of a judge, a panel of men, many of them didn't understand my product, and many of them were just shying away from the topic. And again, like Jojo said, we live in a world where majority are women. And if we as men or we as a society are not addressing issues affecting half of the population, how are we going to make progress?
Daniel wants water. Mohammed, I have a question for you, which, I'm just wondering if you're also suffering from the same predicament where you're going to a banker and telling them about your great innovation, but they're simply from another generation. Are you facing this sort of challenge?
Exactly. So I know they know the problem, they know what to do, but because their mindsets are different and their approach to problems are different. Let's say, for instance, some people will even prefer buying 2,000 antennas abroad than buying locally sourced ones that are cheaper and that if they need maintenance, they can really get us at any time. Mm-hmm. So it's sometimes difficult to even see Sierra Leonean supporting Sierra Leonean businesses. Even though we have the opportunity, thanks to the local content, that gives us the opportunity to have 30% representation of local-made products in all business places. But even at that, how many Sierra Leoneans are really buying Sierra Leonean businesses? They will say, this is not even guaranteed. It's not sober-minded. They want imported things. But it takes time for them to really see that what we're doing, we're bringing values to Sierra Leone.
So what can be done then? I mean, if Mohammed is already doing his bit, he is creating innovation and Sierra Leoneans are turning back on it. If Haja is bringing sanitary towels and people are saying, hey, you're a woman, you don't know what to do. So how does this country move forward with its youth?
So I think everything has to do with collective responsibility. We all need to work together as a team. And also sometimes we do have the laws, but the implementation is lacking. So how about if we promote each other as young people? Now we know that Mohammed is creating this one. It's a good thing that I realized that members from the panel were asking about the price because they wanted to support him. This is a good venture. We need to do this. And also as the media, I think one of my key responsibilities over the years has been creating stories or covering stories about young people involved into innovation, making them on an international platform. I have covered stories in the past about young people doing technological developments, innovations, and the rest. So we need to work together as a team. Another key thing about the issues of gender, this is quite very important. Women have been facing so many challenges. I've been talking to them in the past. When you want to get a particular project, being approved or whatever it is, there's this whole issue of having probably affairs with women as the situation is, which is quite bad. And that's something that needs another discussion anyway.
Okay, so Dr. Ekam, I want to come back to you because we've heard a lot of things that might make one depressed, electricity not available, internet penetration very low, education quality questionable, but it's not all gloom and doom, is it?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to say as a young person in government, I wear that hat because I think it's my responsibility as a citizen to be in spaces where I can drive positive change. So in my role as Director of Research and Delivery, that's what I do. Undertake research and advice, and I have to say is that I put forward the best advice. And when you're making decisions, of course, you have to look at different factors. There are those that need to be politically correct. There are those that have to do with the resources that are available. But my belief is that in continuing in service is making sure that we have a critical mass of change makers. So that's what we have here, and it's why I'm participating in this. But what we need to do is we need to revisit the way we fund our development, because we're always talking about financial inclusion, getting entrepreneurship. Now we put in money into incubators and accelerators, but then we're working with development partners also, and it always seems to be it's more about a numbers game around number of beneficiaries than impact. So I was just saying, what if we consider instead of giving each person $1,000, that would not adequately empower them to scale to that level that they can employ as many people and then get to that threshold that they can actually make contribution to the tax system, versus investing that 100,000 say into 2 businesses that can get them to scale, employ 500 people and make absolute adequate contributions to the tax system.
Okay, let's speak to Josephine, because we've heard about solutions that are already working, examples that are already creating critical change. Of course, one of the things that your organization has done exactly that. What more can be done?
I think the most important thing to note is as we continue this fight, we should continue to speak up. We should not relent. And as we speak up, we should show more mercy, because at some points when I'm working on the streets of Freetown or across this country, and I hear the way men refer to women, and I hear the way the leaders of our country talk about women, sometimes you just have to treat them with grace, because their level of ignorance that needs to be worked on. And our speaking up, owning these spaces, are the things that is making sure that awareness is being raised, making sure that we continue to work for the things that are for us.
Okay, and Daniel, we said earlier that there are many Daniels who we know in this community. What is your message to them? Because, you might not have achieved your dream of going into engineering school, but you've made something of yourself.
I just want to give a word of advice. They should not give up. They should thrive and try to diversify certain things. In fact, when I was not able to further my education, I find ways to try to survive. And I want to say to all the young Sierra Leoneans that are going through, for them not to give up, for them to man up and not to go out to the street, take drug, bend, drop out. Let them find ways to be diversified. For now, what I'm looking for, encouragement, support, financial aid to further my cause, and I have a lot of business ideas, a lot of experience.
Okay. Haja, we started with you. I'd like to conclude with you. What do you think lies ahead for the youth of this country? Earlier I asked if they're able to compete globally. I wonder if your answer has changed.
I think after hearing all this, I strongly stand on my answer, because I see Daniel here saying, I reach out to people, they're supposed to help me. Like, in an ideal world, they're not supposed to help you. The resources are supposed to be there to help you. we don't even have systems where you can take loans and go to college, and after you get a job, you pay that back. We don't have systems. I'm not for those systems, though. I'm just saying these are things. I'm just saying these are things that we don't even have. Like, when they were talking about people in the rural communities, this is how Sierra Leoneans, like literally globally, this is how we stand. But I feel like no one should die of malaria in this country. No one is supposed to go to bed without electricity or not having to eat. Like, we still have a huge percentage of the population living, below the poverty line. Don't tell me I need to compete in the global market when I can't even compete with countries like Kenya and Ghana. Look at what Rwanda is doing, Senegal in 2035. They're going to have so much energy from solar. And here we are, like, looking at countries like the US and England. We have to stop that. Let's compete locally instead of like globally. And I think one step at a time with local solutions, we can get there.
One step at a time. I like that. And I think that's also a great place for us to end. At the beginning of this debate, I asked if the Sierra Leonean youth are set up to compete globally. And I think the answer we've heard repeated over and over again is in good time. Thank you for watching.